Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bravo Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Midwinter, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dylan Ferguson. Dylan, how's it going?
Well, just, trying to take it one day at a time. It's, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that everything's fine. It's been a hard time. We're all trying to do our best we can with, just pouring myself a bit of rosé here.
Oh my God.
It's hard to wrap your head around the fact that you just kind of have to get up in the morning and just like any other day, have breakfast, go to work, do a reality TV podcast, knowing that there's still going to be that big, but also adorably small hole in our lives left by rosé. So, I'm sure that that we're all struggling with the news about Rosé's passing, and I see I'm the only one drinking rosé, I think, but that's fine because we all grieve in our own ways.
Absolutely.
And I've decided to take a day of reflection and remembrance. #rosé all day, and that's how I've decided to move forward. So, yeah, doing the best I can. Good to see you again, Craig.
Yeah, well, joining us for this this horse wake is our outsider this week, John Wilson.
I would rather live in shit than let anyone see me working a shovel.
There it is.
Excellent. That's an excellent tagline. I'm pretty sure that is not a canon housewife tagline. That's a John Wilson original.
Yeah, it's
Ooh,
kind of
you stumped Craig.
It's kind of a ripoff of actually a quote from The Wire.
Okay.
Oh,
so you didn't stump him.
No.
Got a little excited there for a second.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Well, for anyone that's just joining this podcast for the first time, what we do here is we bring on someone who doesn't follow Bravo shows or The Real Housewives, make them watch the episodes for the week and get their takes. John is our outsider this week. John, do you want to just let people know what your past experience watching reality TV is, and what your take on what your idea of reality TV was prior to going into this?
Sure. I guess I've watched, more competition-based reality TV, like, Survivor and those kind of shows. I usually have been avoiding it otherwise. My wife watches a lot, so I'll enter and leave the room while it's on. For instance, that the one where they're all on a boat.
Below Deck,
the yacht-based reality TV. Yeah, so I've definitely watched some Below Deck, and some Big Brother and things like that. But I'm familiar with the kind of the drama and the editing styles of those kind of shows, which were a little similar to the ones I watched, but I'd never really watched Housewives or know anything about the ecosystem that they're all in.
Yeah,
ecosystem's a good word. I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're the first person to bring up Below Deck. Which is, I think, right now Bravo's most popular show on TV on the channel. It's kind of interesting how there are a lot of similarities, in my opinion, from Below Deck to something like Housewives or Vanderpump Rules. But again, it is very distinct because it bears similarities to competition reality shows in that each season the cast is largely different. There's a few key players that are the same from season to season, but for the most part you bring on a brand new cast who don't have the shared backstory and shared history and drama, and it's kind of a fresh slate each season. So it's a big difference from something like Real Housewives of New Jersey, where you've got these deep rooted histories that are the driving the conflict and the narrative. Um, did you find at all that it was difficult to jump into either of these shows without context?
It wasn't like difficult. Like it was, I hit the button, and it played, and there I was watching it. It was that part was easy. And I kind of like, they do a lot of cutting back to like trying to remind you of the backstory, where I'm like, oh, something happened between them 5 years ago. It's in black and white. Wow, this is really old. Must have been really old.
Yeah.
Like they do that kind of like
old timey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's grainy footage.
Yeah, just turn the color balance down. So
yeah. But I don't know what the character is like without that, unless they told me the context. It's just like 10 women jabbering, and I'm trying to like find out who made out with who, or like what, someone's a rat and so forth. So it was like,
bleep that out, Craig. That's a very serious slur.
Yeah. So no, it was like I didn't know what was going on, but right away, at least the new Housewives of New Jersey, I'm like, bachelorette party in Dublin, let's go. They set me up, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be fun. We're chugging Guinness. Like, all right.
Yeah.
So that's that part of it I got. I don't know who the people are. Yeah.
Let's get started with the Real Housewives of New Jersey. I thought this was a really fun episode. I thought that we got to see like some really good bonding at the start, and then things immediately kind of deteriorate the next morning. What highlights did you have from watching this?
I guess it felt like a lot of the episode revolved around someone being called a rat was like the worst thing in the world, as Dylan kind of mentioned it. And I just, that was funny that, and I don't know, it seemed like a theme, at least in the other.
What's fun is that.
Yeah. It was like a theme with the other episode where someone called someone a specific word, and then they just focused on that for a super long time.
Yeah. They love to define what things you're allowed or not allowed, more like to do or say, in terms of like it's an Italian thing. So I think it'd be really fun to like just compile a list of the definition of an Italian according to the Real Housewives of New Jersey, and all their rules that they make up on the spot in order to paint somebody doing something as completely beyond the pale.
Yeah, when the wind blows from the east, it's a big deal for Italian families.
Not saying there's nothing to that. I mean, I get it. They've got like these long, deep-seated traditions, but I love the way that they'll just hang on to that as any excuse for blowing their top. Because you're not allowed to do that because we're Italian. All right, I'll take your word for it, I guess. Sure.
I like the beer chugging.
So which of the household
at the beginning, just like they're having a drinking competition to start the episode. Like that was, like you said, it was fun.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was kind of impressed a little bit, because Guinness, like chugging Guinness, it's like eating a sandwich.
Not many Housewives shows have like multiple cast members who are good at chugging beer, or who you would assume would be good at chugging beer, which is another one of the benefits of the Jersey crew.
Yeah, I loved during that drinking contest that we got just a shot of Teresa like clapping on the sideline while everyone is like chugging the beer like she's dress. A grandma. Yeah, watching mini soccer. Just
good job, you did it really hard.
I also liked the random shots of like a guy in the kitchen watching like in disgust, like the patron out of focus, kind of like ugh, like giving it just ugh, like look to kind of show like they're really, I don't know, Yeah, well, I'm wondering like how many cameras are in the bar too. Like I'm always thinking about like how are people also in public with them? Like what's going on? What's the scene like outside of the but outside of the show, like behind the scenes? I don't know, but I often
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring that up. That's kind of something that was brought up last week when we had Jared's story on, and he was like, "Don't the cameras feel really like intrusive to these people?" But um, again, like these women, this is a fairly like mature cast of housewives. Although there are two like newbies. They're fairly mature in that they have been doing this for a long time. So they don't see the cameras as much as, the people that are having a candlelit dinner over in the corner would see the cameras up in their faces. Um, but yeah, it definitely would be quite the scene if you're just out in Dublin, just having a candlelit dinner. Don't really have the same like cultural awareness of what Real Housewives is, and all of a sudden, the Real Housewives, not of Beverly Hills, not of New York City, but the Real Housewives of New Jersey, like burst in and like start going at each other. It would definitely be like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah, I can understand why those kitchen workers would just look at them in disgust. But that's also how kitchen workers look at everybody all the time. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Resting kitchen worker face. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
I did catch a glimpse when they were walking over the bridge in Dublin of their security guard who was like kind of protecting them. Like, so I know there's like escorts around them, making sure that regular folk don't kind of like walk into their conversation or something, right?
Yeah, and also they would each have kind of like a handler producer. So typically, like they'll be like, I don't know if it's like an associate producer or what the title is for them, but they kind of serve as the housewives specific producer, and this producer will be just responsible for like one or two housewives specifically, and kind of be the handler. So all of those would be on site, and they're, the purpose that they serve is to like, kind of be the manager in the corner of the boxing ring, like pumping them up, and like also trying to use the whatever position that they're in order to like create drama or stimulate the scene in some way. So they all have that. And so it would be like a very substantial production crew that is, roaming around the streets with them.
That sounds like a dream
Yeah,
job.
I'm just picturing like,
yeah.
I'm picturing Jennifer and Margaret like going to their separate quarters, and somebody takes their mouth guards out, they spit into a bucket, just like breathing heavily.
It is like that. It's exactly like that.
Housewife handler for that's just a solid position, like job I want to apply to.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna start throwing it on my resume and see if anyone asks about it whenever a recruiter calls me.
You got to be careful which one you choose, though, right? If you because if you say you're the handler for I don't know, if you're saying the handler for Marisol on Miami or something, they're going to be like, well, she's drinking herself to death, man. Like, do you not control that?
Yeah. Did you have any other specific highlights from Real Housewives in New Jersey, John?
Let me see. I noticed that they were talking so loudly that like the sound was like peaking in that, like they are really loud. I mean,
oh yeah,
it is like even whatever mics they got going on there, it is they're just hanging on there. Also,
they're just backing those bikes further and further up till they're out in the street, cleaning the windows.
So some pretty harsh words. Was it disheveled drug addict? The one called
yeah.
But
I was surprised to see that we actually got an apology from Margaret.
Well, she pulled back and said,
like, and it's
she like pulled back to say like I'm sorry, I went too far with disheveled drug addict. She's just disheveled. which
Yeah, she just pulled back the drug addict. So she retracted part of it.
yeah, it made me think of like The Simpsons when he's like, I may be ugly and stupid, but what was the third thing you said? Like a man, like
I mean, she did walk it back a bit, but I think it wasn't so much that we got an apology for like those specific words that stood out to me. It was that, I think the exchange went something like, Margaret's like, "Oh, I don't think I'm a saint, but I also don't think I'm everything you make me out to be." And then Jen says something to the extent of like, "I'm not everything you make me out to be either." And Marge goes, "Well, I haven't made you out to be anything." And Jen just cuts her off and says, "Yeah, you called me a disheveled drug addict. Like, this is a specific thing that you have made me out to be." And for Margaret to be like, "Yeah, you're right. I apologize. I was too harsh." It was pretty surprising from someone who is seemingly hell bent on being at odds with Jennifer, for her to kind of give up and
To cede any ground whatsoever.
yeah, it seemed like really unnecessary for her to do. Like, she didn't really have any reason, I guess, other than maybe public opinion to apologize, to like look somewhat self-aware.
Right.
But it came across, yeah, it was very surprising to me.
what was the drugs she was addicted to, or was she not addicted to drugs?
Well, she was not like a full-blown addict or anything, but she likes to like smoke a joint after the kids go to bed.
Yeah, I think it was just in reference to weed smoke. Like that's
Yeah.
Like she just likes to smoke a joint once in a while.
Yeah.
So she
likes
that
coffee.
Yeah.
She really likes coffee.
Meanwhile,
And that can get you in trouble.
They're just pounding like wine and everything every single day, but she smoked a joint.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure all these women are on like some pills and like Ozempic and stuff, and it's like, you smoke weed? Wow, you're using drugs? Crazy.
Yeah. I wonder if that's also like a generational thing, because there is a bit of like an age gap between Jen and Margaret, and I feel like if you are maybe closer to Margaret's age, where there's probably been like a bigger stigma around marijuana in your lifetime, that it seems like a bit more of like a cutting jab or something, kind of shocking. Whereas now that like marijuana is, decriminalized in a lot of states, I don't know what the number is, but like it's not really shocking to anyone to hear that someone, uses marijuana occasionally.
Yeah, no, I think like for somebody of Margaret's age, it's like if you like have kids and you smoke weed, it's like, wow, your life's a mess. But for like, somebody a bit younger, it's like, you don't smoke weed and you have kids? Yeah. Like, how do you unwind
after? So John, one of the standing conflicts within Real Housewives of New Jersey is this battle between Teresa and Melissa. And I think we saw this kind of starting to really boil in this episode. I'm wondering what you gathered about that conflict, and, what side of that conflict you landed on, given the information that you were exposed to this week.
Sure. I was going to mention that was the other memorable part, was their arguing on the bus about Teresa making a comment about what was the other woman's name? Her daughter not
Melissa.
Hanging out.
Yeah.
Melissa. Yeah. So like their daughters, she didn't go to her whatever event, and then I don't know. So all I gathered from that was there was like some super defensive thing, because she just said like, don't say my daughter's name, like Melissa was just like taken aback that she mentioned her daughter. And so they did do like the grainy, black and white, some other comment occurred in the past, but I didn't really gather the context of their argument, except for that, like, her daughter was off limits for some reason. And it seemed like I felt like Teresa was not, going too far or saying something out of line, but this, because I don't know like the context of that, but I just was like, what? She was just mentioning, like, what do you care if your daughters are friends or not? And I don't know. It just seemed like just like suddenly Melissa was like pissed and wanted everyone to like know that. But I don't know. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, this to me, this like scene in the Sprinter van, I guess it was Rachel Fuda that brought this up, and it really felt like an alley oop to Melissa. Like she was putting the ball out there, like just hoping that Teresa is gonna say something about Antonia, just so that Melissa could have something to be upset about. And obviously, it paid off. But I think that Melissa was just like really grasping at something, and there's people that are putting like montages of clips of Melissa online where she is speaking like poorly about her nieces, so she's really not like holding any higher ground here. One of the things that I really like about New Jersey in terms of like watching it and engaging with it is like I can't think of any other example of a piece of media that causes fans to really be brought into family drama to the extent that Real Housewives of New Jersey is. Like, I feel like you can't help but, watch this. And if you're participating in the fan base, but pick a side of either Teresa or Melissa and be really entrenched in the drama. And, it feels like, you're actually actively participating in family drama, and every single thing that you say or do within that like conversation, you are you're furthering that argument in some way. There's always going to be someone on the opposite side that's going to pick apart things, and I think that's really, I don't know. It's obviously like a kind of a really toxic thing, but it's something that I appreciate the toxicity, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's how mafia start, right? Or mafia
Yeah.
wars, anyways. But no, I know what you're saying. That's a good point. It's like you get drawn into not just siding with an individual or another, but their whole clan.
Yeah.
They have these whole family units that you become invested in.
Craig,
It's very intense.
And
you just
yeah,
like to drink,
and in the case of the like Melissa's,
you just drink in the radioactive, like just it burns when it goes down. You're like drinking.
Oh yeah,
Drano.
put it into my vein. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of like Melissa's fans and supporters, I'm not entirely convinced that there's not a significant portion of them that are like bots or like a bot farm, because they're like very active online somehow. And Melissa somehow seems to have more Instagram followers than Teresa, like substantially, which doesn't make sense because I think like Teresa, if you're thinking about iconic housewives across any franchise, you're thinking Teresa Giudice before you're thinking Melissa Gorga. Like Teresa Giudice is going to be one of the, the top 3 housewife names that you're thinking of. Melissa Gorga is,
she's had her own spinoff at one point, right?
Yeah, she went to jail. She was like, and that was news outside of the Bravo sphere. Like, that was a high profile thing relative to a lot of the other shit that housewives argue about. So, it just seems really strange that Melissa would have a larger online following and more like active.
We need a congressional investigation.
Yeah, we do.
Gotta get to the bottom of this.
And no witness tampering. Dylan, what highlights did you have from this episode?
I think my favorite part was when Dolores says, "What I love about Dublin is how untouched it is," as they pull up to a tapas restaurant. But my second favorite part was, I think, right before that, when they're all in the van and before once again exploded into the recriminations and anger. They had a really interesting conversation where they're comparing stories about having been cheated on, or in some cases have cheated
Yeah.
on, a husband or a partner, and how they made the decision of whether to break it off with that partner or to try to continue either as a couple or as friends in some capacity. And the way that they were comparing notes about those choices they made, and weighing the value of what you've invested in another person over so much of your life, and how much that means to you versus the possible recurring negatives in the future, and how emotional those decisions are. I thought that was a very good moment because it was very emotional, and it was a rare moment of them like really being a group that's comparing notes and being there for each other to an extent. And it's a mature moment too, like it, and
Yeah.
it's the kind of thing that you don't really see in scripted media, for all
Yeah.
the countless movies there are about people starting relationships or deciding to get married or whatever. That it's very rare to see those kind of storylines addressed about when the moment happens that a partner betrays the trust, and then you have to just decide whether that it's best to continue to move forward or not. And it's mature in the sense that, like, we'll get to Vanderpump Rules in a second, but you see the difference between like slightly older characters and slightly younger characters
Yeah.
in terms of, it's very attractive when you're younger to like draw lines in the sand and just be like, I've been betrayed, I have to cut you out of my life forever. That's me standing on my principles, doing what I have to do for me. And then there's the more mature version where you're like, well, I'm thinking about actually my life and my future and my happiness and how much of my self is invested in another person. And these decisions are actually a lot more complex than that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was actually a really interesting conversation, and very emotional and very effective. So I like that scene a lot. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I had that marked down too in my notes as something that really stood out to me. It was a really like candid moment, and I love when we get things like this, like very introspective, candid discussions amongst housewives that you know come from a very like human place, and they kind of slip into the episode. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one of the qualities of Real Housewives that, again, like you say, you don't see that in scripted television without it being like really ham-fisted in there by
Yeah.
the writers and feeling very forced. And I thought that it was interesting how that moment evolved, because it seemed to start with Margaret saying, "Hey, Teresa, you should have like danced with that Irish guy at the bar," which to me felt like it was a play for her. Like it was a strategic play for her to try to draw out this information to come out of Jen's mouth. I think that she's constantly trying to get Jen to expose this rumor about Melissa, this piece of information. She wants it to come out of, Jen's mouth so that she ends up being the bad guy. And I think it
Right.
started as Margaret really baiting her in a sort of strategic social positioning way that you see throughout housewife shows. That's like the game of it. And it just evolved into like a really like human moment.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking, like you said, about infidelity and how like navigating infidelity, not in terms of black and white, which is something that you see in most narrative
Mm-hmm.
fictional television, but kind of the gray scale in between, and how you manage that, which is probably a lot closer to the truth that people live, especially as they mature. So yeah,
Yeah.
this was a really amazing moment that I really appreciate, and I thought, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is something that housewives gives that you don't see everywhere.
For
This
sure.
is very like illustrative of um the beauty that you see in this form of art.
Totally. And because it's also something that's very relatable, even though it's not as represented enough in scripted fiction, because like, being cheated on or cheating on people or having that happen is something that's almost universal experience. There's such an impulse that people have, and we definitely see that in Vanderpump. We'll get to that, to treat every instance of it as if it were like some cataclysm that's like almost like something that you couldn't even imagine happening, and that's understandable on an emotional level. It understand
Yeah.
it's reasonable that it feels that way emotionally, but the mature perspective is like, this is just something that everybody goes through. and
Yeah.
and to have that kind of like that emotional maturity to discuss it in a way that you rarely see it discussed. A depiction of that I thought was really interesting, and a nice break from the rest of the episode, which was just endless shouting over one another and getting drunk a bit at the start. But I am on the whole looking forward to them going back to New Jersey, because I want the dudes back.
Yeah.
I want them back home.
I was wondering where the dudes were,
but it's like,
yeah,
they're back in Jersey.
I assumed there was dudes, but I was like, maybe the husbands aren't in the show. Like, wasn't sure about that.
Well, in most shows they take a back seat, but in New Jersey they take a front seat, and we're just not seeing them in this episode because they're on a cast trip. Yeah. But there's one other thing that I want to go back to about that conversation about infidelity that we saw. And what I thought was interesting is that we also saw kind of a switch between, Housewives gameplay and kind of human engagement, specifically in Margaret, because when she was talking about her experience as being, the cheater and navigating that, she was very honest. And then when she was referring to the incident of infidelity between Jen and Bill, she seeded that, you guys made it through this because, you love each other and you chose to go down that path to go through it, and you truly love each other. And, that infidelity, bringing up that infidelity, is at the root of the conflict between Jen and Margaret, at least the initially.
Yeah.
And so for her to, be really human and be like, you guys love each other. I see that, there's actual love within your relationship. I thought that it was a really nice to see her kind of flip out of game mode and to, connect on a human level.
Yeah, flip out of game mode, I think, is the key phrase there. That's because it shows the difference between having a conversation that has like actual engagement with their personal histories and emotions, and all these disputes where it's all about really pretending to have like much bigger emotional stakes than you actually do have, in order to do gamesmanship, in order to get people on your side and all that stuff, which is why at a certain point, these discussions become just like Talmudic. It's just like, it's almost pure esoterica, like just trying to figure out what information it's unacceptable to share, when it's welcome to have information shared, when you're allowed to be angry that somebody shared what you said, and when you're not allowed to be angry when somebody shared what you said. There's just like, you can't trace those rules. You can't map this out at this point, because it's just become pure gamesmanship, and the contrast between that and having an actual conversation that like really touches on what they would actually feel about their lives. In the middle of it, you see a switch flipping.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Dylan, what other highlights did you have from this episode?
Not really much anything else other than that. Though I'm kind of surprised we didn't mention Boujiewolf yet.
Yeah, that was.
So I guess that has to be.
I mean, Rat. They mentioned Rat, and she was trying to, I don't know, Boujiewolf. Then they had to go for a definition like it was a real word. Is that the generational gap?
Okay. So is this a word you've heard before? Because like when
Absolutely
she said it, I was like, okay, this sounds like something that I might have heard before, but I have no idea what she's talking about.
So here's what I think. I think this is kind of like the coffee thing. it's Jen like overplaying her hand and kind of embarrassing herself by being too inorganic with her attempted comeback. And I think that what she did is, I think Jen Fessler said like she like went in the dictionary and looked for a word. I think that's basically what she did. I think she like went online and tried to find like an obscure insult. And I think she didn't realize that she was looking at Urban Dictionary and not like an actual dictionary, because I was trying to find definitions of this word, and there's a few, and they're all in Urban Dictionary. This isn't something you're going to find in Merriam-Webster. So I mean, it's a word in the sense that it seems to be something that people use. It's not in the OED, but it seems to be something people use. It's a word, but it seems to be like club slang or something. So, I mean, I guess check for getting a sort of word. It's maybe not as much of a word as conversating. That's definitely a word, by the way. Just gonna throw that out there because it's come up in like 3 consecutive episodes. I think conversating's a word.
I think Boujiewolf could take off, based on the episode, though. Like, it's definitely a more popular word now.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure that's like trending on Google search rankings now.
Oh yeah. I think I saw a clip of Jen on social media having made a shirt that says Boujiewolf on it now. So she's going to lean into it.
You can get a wardrobe that's got like endorsed and then Boujiewolf. I think you mentioned that this is kind of an example of Jen overplaying her hand a little bit here. And it's really interesting that she does have kind of a history of doing this in arguments, but she is somehow like careful enough with stuff that really matters where she doesn't do this. Like she's kind of like a clumsy housewife strategically. Like she just kind of fumbles around, but she knows just enough of what to protect that. I think that makes her like an especially frustrating adversary for someone like Margaret. So yeah, I think that was really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Another thing that we saw here was when Margaret gets involved in the conflict with Danielle, she tries to hold over Danielle's head this like favor that she did, and we get a clip of it where Margaret just like, without being asked to, has put bougie kids through like a logo generator software and been like, hey, I redesigned your logo here. And Danielle's like, oh, that's so nice. And Margaret's trying to like use this as this like big favor that she did. And like, I've always been kind to you. I put your bougie kids through a logo generator.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Which, by the way, I did not realize until this episode that they're spelling bougie Boujie.
Yeah, I feel like I've usually seen that with a G.
Yeah,
I mean, kids has a Z at the end. That's fair play, but I feel like I'm more used to seeing bougie spelled with a G than a J. Well, it's an Italian thing. What can I say?
Yeah,
we're like Boujiewolf. Am I right?
Yeah.
Edit that out.
Oh yeah. No, that's the episode title now. Boujiewolf. All right. So if you don't have any other highlights, let's move on to Vanderpump Rules. John, what was your first impression of all the cast members of Vanderpump Rules?
Vanderpump Rules, they're younger, and I'll let you know, like, I was confused by the title of the show because it wasn't like Wives, or something. But I was told beforehand that it's a show. One of the housewives has a restaurant. It's like a show about this restaurant, and I quickly was wondering, like, when does the restaurant come into the show? Because I was kind of like waiting for it to be like one of those restaurant reality shows that I've seen a couple times. But it was young people who their relationships, they're making out with each other. It gave me a little bit of below deck vibes as far as like just that kind of drama. I don't know. I didn't find the like characters as interesting as the Housewives. Like they weren't
Oh
as
yeah.
strong, I guess, like as far as like their personalities weren't like I don't know, just in comparison to watching them so close together. But and I don't know, in general it was okay. I'm trying to think like what it seemed like there was a lot of acting in the show, uh, at least in the scene specifically where the three guys, there's like Tom and other guy, they have like the manager tell them that he fired everyone, and it just seemed
Oh yeah.
like it was like the stakes of that, were, seemed like they should be high, but no one actually seemed to care. They were just like kind of saying what they had to say. So that, but then other scenes in the show did seem like they were real interactions. There was like, I don't know. I just felt like maybe it's the people in the show are not as like, they don't have as much personality. I don't know. I kind of just thought the Tom guy was like
Yeah.
whatever, like he's just bland. Except for when he made the comment that he like could not go outside with chipped nails, which I thought was a funny quirk
Oh
of his.
yeah.
They had to get his nails done or something. But yeah, I don't know. There was that was kind of my first impression where I like the Housewives. Like they were more real.
That's why it's in
Yeah,
the
that's
title.
yeah. I think that's interesting that you bring that up. We've had actually a lot of people voice the opposite opinion, that they were more like engaged in Vanderpump Rules versus the Real Housewives. But I think in this specific episode, I can kind of see where you're coming from, because there was, like you said, a lot of content that was a bit more restaurant storyline heavy, surrounding, trying to get Schwartz and Sandy's up and running, which is feels just really constructed and no one really cares about. So it's kind of boring. Um, but yeah, I could see how you could get that read from this episode. Were there any specific characters on here that stood out to you as particularly interesting or engaging, or I guess by contrast, anyone that stood out as particularly bland and boring?
I mean, the episode really revolved a lot around I think it was Raquel, and
Yeah,
she had made out with a couple of the wrong people, uh, and I just find it
yeah.
funny
Tom
that
Schwartz.
yeah, Tom Schwartz and that other woman's son, um,
Oh yeah.
who was
Yeah,
married.
Oliver.
And that kind of drove the episode. So like Raquel was interesting. She's like newly single, I guess, so that's why she's making out with everybody.
Mm.
And I like how it's like high school where people make out, like that's the only detail you get.
Yeah.
It's not on screen. Like I
Specific
didn't
phrase, making out.
yeah, I don't see them like in Below Deck, for instance. You see people like get into bed together and like, or you see them making out in a hot tub. But this was all kind of like just talking about they made out, and you kind of like wondering like, what does that mean? Like he fingered her, or like they, what was like.
Well, we actually didn't see it in the preceding episode, but it was just like an awkward kiss or two. It was like a few awkward kisses, and
Okay,
presumably no more than that. It was very awkward.
Well, their interaction with that was the big like build up where like, oh, now they're gonna talk when Tom Schwartz goes to the restaurant and she's working there, and there was like the most awkward, like he went to try to shake her hand or something, and then they were like trying to make her sit with them.
Oh,
And that was kind of weird. Like it really
in front
weirded
of her
me
boss,
out.
like
Yeah,
It was.
Yeah.
The vibes are really weird.
The vibes were weird.
That's why I like that moment.
Because that was after the restaurant scene where I was like, this seems like too scripted, and then that was like, no, that was real because Tom Schwartz is awkward, and the other Tom is like just trying to get them to be like together and like drive the drama. I guess that was his play there. So yeah,
Making her
those
sit
Yeah.
between them.
yeah, exactly.
So I'm gathering from your take that haven't uh, you haven't heard of the Scandival.
The Scandival. Something
That's a
my
big no.
my
That
wife
was the same reaction to Jennifer saying Boujiewolf right there.
yeah. My wife told me there was something about Tom and Raquel that was on Twitter or something. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but
Yeah. So okay. So Tom Sandoval, the one who got his like nails
yeah,
painted white, so he didn't like put the bar menu in or whatever.
yeah.
Him. So he is like has been dating Ariana for 9 years, and it came out off camera
Hmm.
after they had basically wrapped for the season that he had been sleeping with Raquel for many months, like
Right. Yeah.
8 or 9 months. Um, yeah. So, what we are starting to see in this episode is all the clues kind of dropping about this because the hookup apparently started shortly before the trip to Mexico, which is what we saw in the past like two or three episodes. So now they're kind of in a full blown affair at this point, and people are like constantly looking for Easter eggs of that. And I think that this scene that you're referring to, where Sandoval asks Raquel to come and like sit in between him and Tom Schwartz, the weird, awkward like body language that you're seeing behind it, I think is one of the first big like standout clues that we're getting this season, that there's something there.
And that was right when Marianne walked in the room and said and told me about that. And I was like, no, it's the other Tom. Like they made
Oh
out in
yeah.
Mexico. I was trying to explain what was happening to her. She was trying to tell me what was happening, the scandal. And I was like, you're not, you don't know what's going on. Like, yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense that there was like there's a story in the show that they're telling.
Classic rookie mistake, getting your Toms crossed.
Yeah, well, exactly. It took me a while to realize they were both Tom because they kept calling the one guy Schwartz too. Yeah, but I do definitely not like Tom. Like I don't like him. I don't know. It bothers me. Sandoval. Yeah.
Mustache. Yeah.
Like,
okay, just to be clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, how is his
what
relationship?
other highlights did
I guess I'm wondering, is he like Vanderpump is the housewife who has the restaurant? How is he connected? Is he just work there?
Yeah, well, he started out as a bartender. Like
Okay.
he's season 1 cast on Vanderpump Rules, and so initially the concept, it was to follow the staff of this restaurant, but instead of staying set at this restaurant and focus on whoever the current staff is, it's just continued to follow this same cast from season 1.
Okay.
So how on Below Deck, it's gonna follow the captain and whatever the crew is that season. Vanderpump Rules hasn't. It's as though they took the crew of the first ship Sir, and continued to follow them after they had stopped being yachties, basically. And they pretended to be yachties for a long time, and now they've just dropped that whole facade. And Tom Sandoval and Tom Schwartz have a bar with Lisa Vanderpump, and they're trying to open up another one without Lisa Vanderpump, and that's not going well. I thought the only thing that was interesting about this, restaurant storyline that we got this episode was like it kind of clicked for me that what was different about this restaurant storyline edit was I feel like they're trying to give Lisa Vanderpump a savvy businesswoman edit by showing, these two basically fail without her, and she is this savvy businesswoman that can do no wrong.
Yeah.
Did you have any other highlights from Vanderpump Rules, John?
I noticed there was a scene. I like that actually that everyone has dogs and cats, and there's a lot of dog and cat shots. That was nice. Was there something that they have a dog grooming business too, or was that just like a
Lisa Vanderpump does.
Yeah,
does.
that's where Katie's new boyfriend gets his hair done.
Great line by Sheeta there, because he did absolutely look like some middle-aged woman wearing gloves just hose them off and
right.
them. Yeah.
So that guy, she brings in that guy Satchel, which is just amazing. But it was the fact that they dropped that he was named after Satchel Paige, and then did not just assumed all the viewers would know Satchel Paige. Like he's a baseball player from so 100 years ago or whatever. And and they didn't even say the baseball player or anything. They was these fans of this show aren't going to know Satchel Paige is but he did seem like he was just a curtain on the show.
He looked like a douchier version of Josh Groban, but then I think Sheena just nailed the take on his hair.
I actually loved the moment where they introduced Satchel. It was I laughed my ass off. I just thought it was really funny. Katie's building him up if Tom wants to play these games, well, I'm going to bring my man in, and let me tell you, he's a real man. We fucked a lot.
She was giving him this intro like he was the Don that we saw earlier with Lala.
Bed sheets, they just throw them out now, all ruined. My apartment, I slosh through it. I'm wading through my apartment. It's like Hurricane Katrina in there. It's like Hurricane Katie's vagina, because I'm getting pounded all the time by this fucking real man. And she trots him out, and it's just this slouchy kid with a fucking Cocker Spaniel head. It looks like she found him smoking a roach behind the bleachers at a high school. He's practically taking off a backpack and shoving it under the table, and she's like, "Yeah, here's the guy I fuck all the time. I'm not too tired from boning me all day, are you? Yeah, that's right." And he's sitting there "Yeah, Katie, I think I have a nosebleed." Great moment, loved it.
Yeah, his dick still works, right? She made that comment.
Yeah. That was a dig at her Tom Schwartz, her ex-husband.
Oh wow, okay.
There was a line at one point of one episode where she says his dick doesn't work or something.
Yeah, it's come up a few times that his dick doesn't work. That's
his dick doesn't work. Wow.
A consistent story point.
You don't need a dick to make out.
Yeah.
One other thing that I noticed. When I was thinking about the dogs, I was thinking about just a scene where the women were around a table, and I can't remember the name. There was the one who has a boyfriend who's super jacked, and the one woman was making a sandwich as she was talking. She was just out of the frame.
Lala, right?
Yeah, maybe Lala. They were at a counter, around a whatever kitchen island. And she was making a sandwich, and I just was kind of focused on what is she doing with this knife here? She's just there, she's spreading, she was doing an action, and it cut one line, and then the next line she just had this full sandwich that was on the counter, she just pulled out of a Subway package, and then it was the end of the scene. It was just the way the edit worked. It was she was spreading butter or something, and then just suddenly she had this perfectly cut and made sandwich sitting there.
Dylan, what were your highlights from Vanderpump Rules?
Aside from Satchel, you know what? I was surprised how interested I was actually in Tom Sandoval in this episode. I have to say, Sandoval and Ariana have kind of been bit players this season, right? We haven't seen a
Yeah.
ton of them. They've mostly had just like B plots. They haven't really been in the spotlight at all this season. And now we see a lot more of Sandoval this episode, and I just thought it was interesting just how fucking stressed out the guy looks. Like he's just like ready to snap at everybody all the time. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Like you feel like obviously that they're playing into the show, like it's the restaurant stuff, and the restaurant stuff maybe is part of it too. Like I'm sure it is. Like he says at one point he's like got his mom's retirement savings in it or something,
Yeah.
right? Like if that's true, like damn man, that's potentially rough, especially what's going on now. Like but I'm sure part of the stress too is that he's starting an extramarital affair and probably he's starting to realize that it's that the people are going to find out it's in his friend group. Like it's not going to be under wraps forever. So I thought it was interesting just seeing him as like being completely under a ton of pressure and just like unable to control himself a lot. But that specific awkward scene with Raquel and Tom and Lisa, which I really liked, I did find it interesting the way he kind of gives that information to Raquel that Katie called her a whore and is like delighted to do it because it makes Katie look like shit, and he's delighted to make Katie looks like shit. And then when he realizes he'd said something that was like really wounding to Raquel, he kind of seems to be like about to cry or possibly crying after. And nobody is gonna like me saying that, but it almost makes me like Sandoval a little bit. I mean, no excuse for what he's done. He's a shithead. Sandoval's a shithead. I'm not saying he's not a shithead, but that's the right reaction. That's everybody's reaction is going to be that. But he's never been one of my favorite people, even before he did treated Ariana very poorly, obviously. But one of the benefits of a good reality TV show like Vanderpump's Rules is that you can't lose sight of the fact that everybody's a human and everybody's got their own emotional reality, their emotional stakes in the game. Everybody's got their own skin in the game, and they can make terrible choices, and he has made terrible choices. But he has his own emotional reality too. And this episode, more than any until now, makes it harder to lose sight of the fact that, he's a human like everybody else, and that just adds more complexity to it, because again, you want these to be like black and white, and a lot of the fans, and I'm sure a lot of people involved in making the show, would love there to be clear-cut villains like in a scripted show, but we see enough of them in unscripted moments that we can't deny everybody's humanity. They're all human beings, except for James Kennedy. He has no soul.
Hey, that's completely unnecessary.
But as much as Sandoval is definitely the villain, is going to continue to be the villain, seeing more of him deepens the story. It adds more complexity.
I thought he was like a main character, like the way that episode was, and not seeing the show before, I thought he was like the guy on the show, and but also
he definitely is. It's just this season he has not been so much.
Okay, and it's interesting thinking like the Raquel, she calls Raquel a whore. Raquel in that episode has two separate guys that she's in trouble for making out with, and she's apparently sleeping with Tom. Like it's and then she's like, I don't want to be a mistress, like that big crying thing where I'm being a mistress, and she's sleeping, and she's a mistress, like she's straight up a mistress, according to whatever online. But that was like the big thing where she was like, she's not a mistress, like, or it was an accident, like she was not on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But she is on purpose.
It was kind of interesting to
right.
It was kind of interesting to see how like Raquel had to confront this idea of being positioned as a mistress socially and like online, on the show prior to any of the Scandival revelations happening. Like to see her navigate through this on screen with Oliver is like it is particularly eerie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, again, it's something that makes me like endears me to Raquel a bit more. Someone who does not typically get, at least on the like social media sphere, a lot of grace. But I thought that the way she was navigating the situation with Oliver was pretty good. Like I think that she
Yeah.
handled that pretty well. And I mean, obviously she didn't learn enough from that in order to, take a step back from Tom Sandoval and, give Ariana the heads up or handle that very gracefully. But I think seeing her handle that with like humanity was particularly endearing. And yeah, Dylan, like you said, this reality TV, there's heroes and villains, but it's not black and white. There's always like a human underneath that um, has their own um, motivations and emotions that are driving their actions. So it was an interesting both parallel and contrast to the Scandival revelations that I thought stood out to me as being particularly interesting.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
came off
and
really well
Raquel.
with the Oliver thing. Like it was like, you go girl, like you tell him. And she talked to his wife and stuff, and it really was like, I don't know, I was really rooting for her at that point. Like she did the right thing.
Yeah, and I think you've got like one thing that's kind of interesting about this scenario, and it's not playing out over a particularly long period of time, but to see both Sheena and Lala taking kind of contrasting positions on this, and those are two of the main people that have gone through an experience of being the other woman and having to deal with that very publicly, and to see, you know, Sheena kind of advise how to navigate this carefully and, caution Raquel that, it's not a label that you're going to be able to shake. So just be prepared to kind of deal with it, and taking on like kind of a mentor's role. Whereas Lala has taken the opposite position and really, used it as a point of conflict with Raquel. And then by the end of this episode, kind of the conclusion of this Raquel mistress arc, part one, the mistress father, part one, we see kind of a reconciliation where Lala says, you're not a mistress. I know you're not a mistress. Don't let anyone tell you you're a mistress. And that's kind of like the finale. And that's how they kind of tie up part one in a bow. I thought it was really interesting to, kind of see both of those sides of this, and, how it affected Raquel.
And you know why else it's interesting? Good Lala finally showed up. I keep
Yeah.
talking about the duality of Lala. And she had a terrible last episode where she just said like awful, indefensible things, and was terrible for most of this episode too, because she was just banging that drum and was so happy to have this new information that she could use to cut Raquel apart with. And then at the end, you have Raquel going in to talk to Lala on her birthday when she's surrounded by her friends. I was watching this with my roommate, and it was like a scene in a horror movie. We're both like, "Don't go in there! Don't go in there!" And then, like, surprise, Lala, who's had this like opportunity served up to her, actually gets around to like doing the whole like, women look after each other, solidarity. And it helps that Raquel had the right approach.
Yeah.
Credit to her, of being like, I didn't fully understand what you were trying to teach me until now. Kind of course, Lala's going to enjoy that approach, and that evokes that her fellow feelings, and then she actually shows some guidance and comfort, which was a shocking twist that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so, Dylan, Dylan, did you have any other highlights here?
I've got a whole other page of notes, but it's all just sentences that begin with "Satchel looks like." So I don't know how much time you have.
We don't have a Twitter account, but we should start one just so that we can schedule all those to go out.
I mean, he looks like he knows a lot about spiders. I think he looks like he lives on peanut butter and Oreos. He looks like he has a pet lizard. He looks like he has that poster of the naked chicks with like different Pink Floyd album covers on their backs. He looks like he listens to Greta Van Fleet. He looks like he's in Greta Van Fleet. He looks like he walks on top of the concrete barriers at the edges of parking lots and makes a little sound effect when he jumps off. That's I'm gonna stop. This isn't in the spirit of rosé. I feel mean all of a sudden. That's mostly the rest of my notes. That, and also that I really like that Tom Schwartz uses the I was living the Vida Loca defense. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Those are the highlights.
I've used that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that was interesting to me that we, I guess we saw this earlier in the season, but it didn't really like kind of click with me. But the fact that Tom Schwartz and Katie are still trying to make this like co-parenting arrangement of their dogs work. Like, I don't know.
John said, a lot of dogs.
Yeah, but that seems like a classic, like early mid 20s mistake to be like, okay, we're gonna break up, but we're gonna like share custody of the dogs, and just like it continuing to be this like huge red flag of like someone that cannot move on. I don't know. That's one thing that stood out to me as being particularly interesting here.
Yeah, even Raquel took full custody of the dog, didn't she? With her split with James. Yeah.
But Tom was
it speaks to
Tom was offended that she didn't hang out when she picked up the dog too. Like, one person is in the dog thing just for the
sure.
Like,
and
connection.
I think
not the dog hanging out, but the person hanging out.
And it's exactly why it's a red flag for, a potential partner if they're sharing custody of a pet with their ex. Like, there's definitely someone that is like using this to stay connected to the other person. Like, yeah, you love the pet, and that might be what's at the core of this, but I don't think it's possible to really have a true clean break when you are doing this just over a dog.
There's two dogs.
What the dog's feeling too though.
Is it two dogs?
Yeah, two dogs.
Yeah. I wonder, like, do these people, some of them have like servants who like take after their dogs, or like, I mean, like, how rich are these people? Like, do they have dog servants?
I feel like the cast of Vanderpump Dog Servants, I feel like the cast of Vanderpump Rules are like, they're doing well, but I don't know how, particularly responsible with their money they are. So yeah, they might have dog servants, because that seems like an irresponsible use of funds, and that I wouldn't put it past them. We don't really see that on screen. And, I wonder how much of that is the fact that Lisa Vanderpump has an image of being like an animal lover, responsible animal lover that she likes to put out there, where, she wants to make sure that on shows that where she's an executive producer, that her cast are going to, look at least responsible and caring towards animals. Not using them as tools to stay connected to your ex with whom you've got a very toxic relationship. But yeah, I'm sure they do have dog servants.
I mean, I was going to say the only cast member who's definitely in the strata to have dog servants would be Lisa Vanderpump. But I think Ken is unionized, so I don't think she would actually be able to outsource that job.
Who's got a cat? Is it Sheena?
Does she have a cat? I can't
There
remember
was
a
a
cat.
cat shown a bunch. I can't remember the names, but the really buff guy, and they had a cool looking
Right,
dog.
Brock, the Australian.
Brock.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, makes me love Sheena even more. Like
yeah,
I love that Sheena is a cat person.
yeah.
Yeah, nice to have some variety in there. Otherwise, it's all just dogs and ponies.
It's good. It's good B-roll like
Classic
edit
dog and pony show.
cutting. They're just like, all right, we got to cut this sentence. Cat sleeping, dog, back to the
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Like it's
No,
just
it is a great idea because like you said, everybody likes to see a dog, and then it gives you B-roll that you can stitch a scene together. I mean, it won't
yeah.
help with continuity if an entire sandwich has been assembled in between beats, but it gives you something to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's two other points that I want to get around to before we close out our discussion here. The first is I was personally shocked to find out that Allie was kind of the first to raise
Mhm.
flags about Raquel and Tom.
Who
I
would have
was
seen that coming
not,
from her?
yeah, I was
Who-
not expecting her to be like the Perry Mason of Vanderpump Rules.
Oh, yeah, that's surprising.
It was interesting that as soon as she delivered this information to the girls, that Katie was very quick to kind of use it. Like I felt that I don't know. It seemed like she used it very emotionally and not strategically,
Mm.
which I guess you can kind of expect from Katie as a person and as a character, but as like a 10-year reality TV veteran, it was a bit surprising that she would just, kind of off the cuff, you know, tip her hand. And now
Right.
Tom Sandoval is going to be on alert that, oh, this is already like floating around as a storyline.
Yeah, that makes sense. That might have been a little premature on her part, emotionally driven. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I wanted to talk about was um, Tom Schwartz's former roommate, Joe, Kristen Doughty's crazy friend,
Right.
finally makes an on-screen appearance in a like old-timey vignette flashback, where we see just a very brief interaction between the two. And we get a bit more context on Katie's animosity towards her, stemming from the last text message that she sent to Katie uh, before moving in with Schwartz, and also the first message after the divorce, where she's like, "I will always love and respect you," and then immediately goes and moves in with her ex-husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would like. I feel like we won't, but I would like to see a little bit more of that because I feel like wasn't there a bit of like a hot mic moment where they had Schwartz saying "I love you" to her?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the interaction that we got, and didn't seem like it didn't seem like they were in a relationship, to be
No,
honest.
no.
It seemed like kind of like a friendly
But
thing.
it indicates a level of intimacy that you can understand why that would make Katie very uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Even
for
if they're
sure.
not sleeping together, like you could see why that she would be very
What
upset that somebody that they have like a very intimate relationship with, like immediately became roommates.
I wonder why. Yeah, she's a roommate. Like, was she needing a place to stay? Like, there was nowhere else to stay, that she had to stay with her recently getting divorced friend. Like, she doesn't know anyone else. Like, I don't know. It just seems a little weird. I feel like,
Yeah, it would be one thing if it was like Tom's like, okay, well, I'm splitting up with Katie. I need a place to crash. Can I crash with you? But
mm-hmm.
this is an apartment that like Schwartz is just moving into, and then I guess Joe is also moving into. I hesitate to like speculate on Joe too much up until now, just because she hasn't really appeared on camera and has only, been alluded to. But now that we've actually got an albeit brief moment of her, I feel like she's kind of fair game a little bit to speculate about. So, but yeah, it does seem really strange and like a impulsive thing that they would move in together, or at least very like um, um, thoughtless. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to me to see how that relationship evolves, and knowing that Kristen Doughty is a friend of hers, and we get to see Kristen later this season. I'm curious if there'll be any sort of resolution to that storyline. I doubt it, but I'm still eager to see if that happens.
I would love to see Kristen show up and just completely explain their history, Joe and Tom Schwartz's history.
Yeah, I want to get one of those like maps with photos and like with yarn connecting them.
Right.
I want to get that sort of explanation from Kristen Doughty.
She would do it
really
too.
like,
she would absolutely do it.
Yeah, and like Kristen Doughty has this great like on screen way about her where she's like kind of like frantic and like pacey and like always like darting full time, and like I feel like if there's anyone that's going to get that kind of grizzle detective persona that we've had come up on this podcast, a lot of our guests have projected that on various reality characters. I think that Kristen Doughty is the most well suited for that.
Cast Kristen Doughty as Columbo.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Did either of you have any final thoughts on either Vanderpump Rules or Real Housewives of New Jersey?
Yeah, that's about the highlights. Unless you want to know more things that Satchel looks like, but I think we got enough.
Yeah. Close us out with a few more.
What did it even say? I mean, Satchel looks like he owns a hacky sack. I don't know if I said that. Yeah. Satchel looks like he's referred to Christopher Nolan as the Kubrick of our time.
Oh.
That's enough. That's enough.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, John, for doing this. It was so good to have you on. Do you want to let everyone know where they can find you?
Yeah, I'd prefer not to give up my home address, but I appreciate you guys having me on the show. It was very nice, kind of get into the ecosystem and see what the Housewives are like. You could follow me on Instagram at Johnny Wislon, JohnnyWizlon, and check out whatever comedy stuff I'm doing. If you feel like, I don't care. But if I see you, I'll give you a big smile and a wave and so forth. Tell me you heard me on Bravo Insider or Outsider. I'm now an insider now. I consider myself an insider.
Yeah, you've earned your badge.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks guys. That was fun.
Dylan, how about you?
You can find me writing about movies on Substack. I should have a new thing about the Creed movies coming up soon. I'll take this opportunity to mention, because I know Craig's too humble to do it, that if you do want to financially contribute to Bravo Outsider, all proceeds from this episode are going to be going to a charitable organization that helps communities and families dealing with the loss of a small pony. If you or a person you love is currently dealing with the loss of a miniature show horse, there are organizations out there that help. You're not alone. There are people you could reach out to.
Yeah. Don't forget to reach out. We'll put a link in the show notes for sure. Mm-hmm. Well, this has been the Bravo Outsider for this week. You can find us online at bravooutsider.com, wherever you find podcasts. Give us a subscribe and a rating. You can also find us on YouTube at Bravo Outsider. Until next week, keep on wifing.
Rest in power, Rose.